Here we are, Home Advantage interview number 21 with head coach of Little Rock, Arkansas, Neil Erisman. How are you doing today, Neil?
Good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fantastic. I'm really excited to do this interview with you, and I'm glad you gave me the chance to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is pretty cool. I've been following what you and your buddy have been doing, here for, a few months, and I think it's awesome that you're getting started at a young age. That's awesome.
It's definitely a really fun thing that I get to do, and I'm glad that it's been working out the way it has been. Let's jump right into some questions and first start at the beginning of your career. How did you get started with wrestling, and how did you get introduced to the sport?
Well, I was 5 years old when I started wrestling. It was something that my dad and my uncles had done. Nothing, they wrestled in high school, but nothing after that. And my dad was just kind of one day he was like, "Hey, you want to try out wrestling?" I used to wrestle when I was a kid, when I was in high school, and you always want to do what your dad does. So it just kind of happened naturally, and then it just became what I did. And from there, went on, wrestled in high school, and then went to Oklahoma State to wrestle. And that's kind of, the nutshell version of where I started to where I finished my career.
Yes. So right away when you started, you were 5 years old. So did you love the sport right away? Were you old enough to really know if you liked it or not? Or did it take you a little while to kind of find the passion that you have now for it?
Yeah, it took a while. My dad told me that my first 2 years, I didn't know, I didn't know what I was doing. I got pinned every match for 2 years, and I didn't know I was winning or losing at the time. I was just having fun. I was out there wrestling, and my dad told me, I actually remember it. I was 7 years old, and he was like, "Hey, you've been losing every match. Is this, do you still like doing it?" And I was like, "What? I've been losing?" And then it all clicked. And then it all, I didn't hardly lose a match again after that for several years. And it wasn't, I just didn't understand. I was just having fun. And that's what, we need more of. We need more kids just having fun doing it.
Right. Absolutely. So what do you think about the sport that, you said you were probably too young to really realize that you really did love the sport. You didn't know if you were winning and losing. What do you think about the sport draws you in so much, and what do you like about it?
Well, I was a physical kid. I liked, playing rough, and I liked being in control. I liked, I didn't like being controlled. I didn't like, someone else asserting their will on me, and that was just kind of the natural fit for me. I was aggressive, and it was something that just kind of clicked for me that I could go out and now it's easy to say impose my will on someone, but it was a way that I could be rough and got a chance to hurt people without getting in trouble, and that's kind of how it started. But then I realized it wasn't about hurting people. It was about just taking a skill and a skill set and applying it to asserting your will over somebody. And that's really what hooked me.
So, that I know that hooks a lot of people, especially from the beginning when you're that young. That's kind of, you want to get your energy out, and you watch stuff on TV, and you just want to be aggressive, and that's absolutely, yeah, that I understand that for sure. Well, you said for the first 2 years you got pinned pretty much every match, but right after that you started to have a bunch of success. Why do you think you had that much success when you figured out, like, hey, I've been losing every match, but I still love this? That's kind of crazy.
Well, I knew wrestling. I just didn't we didn't really talk about the winning and losing part. We didn't talk about, hey, what you're doing is not working. Like I just learned wrestling, and I loved doing it. And then when it came to realization that I was losing, like, I hated losing. It didn't matter if it was a board game, if it was bowling, if it was wrestling, whatever it was, I hated it. And I hated to lose. And so I think that was the initial drive and passion, was that I just didn't want to lose. I wanted to win. And then it became something that I love learning the skill. I love learning the wrestling positions. I just love learning wrestling. And you combine that with wanting to win, it just kind of snowballed from there, and everything just kind of clicked, and it all came together at once.
So did you play any other sports?
Yeah, I grew up and I've played just about every sport imaginable. I mean, from wrestling to football to soccer, baseball. I never played basketball. I played, tennis. My sister played tennis in college, so tennis was part of our family. Hockey, you name it. I played it, and I played football in high school as well as wrestled.
So it was basically, so you just played football and you wrestled in high school, so it kind of slimmed down to football and wrestling?
Yeah, baseball was just something I did. I mean, I loved competing. That's one thing that I did a lot when I was a kid is, I went home and went to practice, and then me and my friends, either before or after practice, went outside and we played football or we played baseball or hockey, roller hockey. But that was something that I just loved to do. And, when it got to high school, it was soccer season was during football season, so I had to choose there, and I didn't really want to play baseball anymore. So football was just the natural sport.
Right. Was wrestling, in the sense of passion, was that above everything else? Did you always value wrestling and have more of a passion over every other sport?
Yeah, football was fun. It was like what I did to have fun. And I did have a passion for wrestling, but wrestling was like my true passion. That's what I wanted to be great at. That's what I really, really wanted to thrive in. I had football opportunities. I could have probably gone and played football in college. But wrestling was just, it was outside of my faith. It was who I was, and it was what I did. And that was something that, football just was never an option to go on to the next level. I wanted to be great. I had dreams of being great in wrestling.
So talking about in your high school wrestling career, did you go to any big national tournaments and really make a name for yourself on the national scene? Were you successful in that, or did you kind of just stay localized and wrestle where you lived and had success there? I imagine, because you said when you were 7, moving up, you did not lose very much. So were you able to go national tournaments and do well there?
A little. When I was in high school, it was a little different. Tournaments like I didn't even know what the Ironman was. I didn't know what Beast of, like I'd heard Beast of the East, Powerade, Super 32. Didn't even know that was a tournament. The big tournaments, the big national tournaments, were always in the summer. They were always ones that I did. And, I made a name for myself my freshman year when I won Fargo as a cadet. And that's really kind of where I came on to the scene. And that's where, I grew a little bit. High school was a little bit, for me now looking back, it was a little bit of a setback from competition standpoint. I just didn't compete against tough competition all the time. I think I only had about 10 or 12 matches in high school out of my 100 and whatever that I didn't pin somebody until the summer. And so that was something that I really wish I had the opportunities that these kids today have, for sure.
Okay, right. So when did you start thinking about recruiting, and when did coaches start reaching out to you? Obviously, Oklahoma State had to be up there. Being from Kansas, that's kind of like the West, especially at that time. There wasn't like a Fresno State being powerful. So Oklahoma State was kind of the West school. So that had to be a definite up there for you. You ended up choosing to go there. Just can you walk me through that recruiting process, and what were your top schools, and why did you end up choosing Oklahoma State?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up in Kansas, you grow up in the Big 12. I mean, that's just But the Big 12 wrestling was different back then. It was Oklahoma State, it was OU, it was Iowa State, it was Missouri, it was Nebraska, and if we took out of those 6 teams, we would take 52 to nationals, and 48 of them would be All-Americans, and there would be 5 or 6 national champs. And the Big 12 was stinking tough. And so at the time, like that was, I really wanted to wrestle in the Big 12. So there was one team outside of the Big 12 that I was pretty interested in, and that was where Tom Brands was at the time, Virginia Tech. And I was talking to every Big 12 school except for Oklahoma State, and I was serious about a couple schools, probably Missouri, Nebraska, and Iowa State, and Virginia Tech, and that was kind of my list. And then I had a bunch of officials lined up, and junior duels happened, and my dad, actually, it's kind of a cool story. My dad was standing next to John Smith, and I was about to wrestle a kid from Illinois who was he had just won senior nationals. He was highly touted recruit out of high school, and my dad was standing next to John or Coach, and he said, "Hey, you might want to watch this next match. I think that this kid from Kansas, is going to beat this Illinois kid." And John was kind of like, "Okay, well, this kid's pretty tough. We'll see." And I went out there and I took the kid down, 3 or 4 times and tech falled him. And John looked right at my dad and said, "Who's this kid?" My dad's like, "Well, that's my son." And he's like, "Well, no wonder you wanted me to watch him." And he's like, "Yeah, we grew up in the Big 12. We've been wrestling in Oklahoma every weekend since he was 7. So, if that's something you're interested in, let us know." And later on in the dual tournament, we ended up wrestling Illinois again for 3rd, and I had to wrestle him again, and I beat him the same way. I beat him pretty handily. So I beat him twice in the same weekend, and Coach Smith walked down and introduced himself and said, if you want to come to Oklahoma State, we got a spot for you, and we can talk scholarship. And I said, "Okay, well, I got to go home tonight, and I'll jump in the car and drive back down and check it out." And so next morning, I jumped back in my car at the time, and I drove to Oklahoma State, me and my little brother, and I checked it out, and I came home and said, "Dad, this is where I want to be." And it was kind of all over at that point. And you're right, Oklahoma State was the dominant school at the time. They were just won their 3rd national title when I made my decision, and then they won a national title the next year. And it was, I have relationships with guys like, Mark Manning, and Brian Smith was probably the best. But in the end, I fit, and I knew that the minute I stepped on campus, that was the place I needed to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what do you think about Oklahoma State drew you in so much, drew you in? Was it their dominance, or did you have any relationships with the people there? Like, obviously, if John Smith comes to talk to you, you're going to listen, and that's going to be a pretty cool moment, I imagine. But what do you think about it drew you in so much?
Well, number one, John. I remember going to Tulsa Nationals as a kid and seeing him and asking my dad if I could get his autograph. And another funny story, my dad said no. He goes, "You can get his autograph when he signs your scholarship agreement." And I said, I just kind of was like, that's not fair, being 10 years old. But that was number one, was just John, just someone that you always looked up to as a kid. Number two, I had some friends on the team that I competed with nationally from other states that I just knew, and there was already kind of an instant, I fit there, and the culture fit me. And I'd been to Nebraska and Iowa State and to Missouri, and I just never felt like there was each time that I checked out. And I think what drew me in was obviously they were winning, but they were interested in me. Like, they wanted me. And They made that very, very evident, and so did the other schools. But I grew up. I was in Oklahoma every weekend since I was 7 years old, wrestling in a tournament and watching OSU duels, and it was just home to me, and it had been home for a long time.
That makes a lot of sense because, your other school that you mentioned was up there was Virginia Tech, and that is not very close to Kansas.
Not at all.
So you committed, was that around your junior year?
So back then you couldn't talk to recruits until July 1 of their senior year. So I committed right before my senior year, and the recruiting process was a lot different. You didn't get phone calls till your senior year of high school, and so it was at the beginning of my senior year, and yeah.
So how did that last senior year go for you, knowing you're going to be a Cowboy in the next 4 or 5 years? What did you do in that next senior year?
I had a good year. I won state, and then I went down that summer. That was the first year they ever, from my knowledge, I think it was the first year of what they call the summer bridge program, where you can go in and take 6 hours of school or of classes. And so I spent that next summer after my senior year down at Oklahoma State taking classes and training, and went to Fargo, and just was getting acclimated. But my senior year was good. We didn't really wrestle. I come from a small town in Kansas, and we didn't really have a great schedule, so I didn't have a lot of great competition much, and just finished my senior year off good and right.
So, did you go to Fargo that summer?
Yes, I did.
How did that go?
It went pretty good. I didn't win. I think I took 4th or something like that, but it was good. It was I wasn't originally going, and then last minute, because I was taking classes, and last minute was like Coach Smith was like, "Hey, you're going to Fargo," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I hadn't really been training, right. We were training, but it was more about lifting and just kind of learning, and so I went, I went out and competed, and I did all right.
Yeah. So you were already in Stillwater leading up to your redshirt freshman year. Was there any discussion on not redshirting, or was it just redshirt, take a year, get ready for the college season or college career, I'll say? Was there anything not hinting that you would take a redshirt?
It was never really, much of a discussion. You always ask the question in the recruiting process. Hey, do you plan on redshirting? If I was ready to do whatever, and
Right.
I think that redshirt year was good for me, just to grow and to mature. But in the end, like I remember our guy at the time, who I ended up having to beat out for the spot the next couple of years, he was struggling a little bit, and John was frustrated one day and said, "Hey, listen, you better be ready, because you might be wrestling." But in the end, I ended up redshirting, and I think that's what was best for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So your freshman year, you went 16-9, I believe. Had a pretty solid year, especially wrestling Oklahoma State. Not totally used to the college scene, I imagine, competing. I don't know, how many matches did you wrestle in your redshirt year?
That's a great question. I don't even know if I could tell you how many matches I wrestled in my whole career, let alone my redshirt year. My redshirt year was a good year. Wrestled in some good tournaments, wrestled some good kids. But yeah, I mean, probably in that 20 something matches range.
Okay. So when you wrestled in that freshman year after your redshirt year, what was it like your first duel in Gallagher Arena, and what was that freshman year like with all the different things that you can experience in a college season, especially at a place like Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I mean, it was it's getting back to the atmosphere that it was when I was there. We just won 4 national titles, so 14,000 people was pretty much every duel. And my first match was rough. I had to wrestle Dustin, the CP Slater, the older one, my first match, and I was a true freshman, and he worked me over pretty good. And it didn't go well, but the atmosphere was awesome. I mean, you got that many people behind your back, all wearing orange, yelling for you. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, So you were wrestling, and Oklahoma State is really known for its branch of coaching, I'll call it. So, like, John Smith has coached so many now head coaches. What was it like to work under him? And did you ever see yourself, like, thinking after wrestling, was it always just, I'm going to coach wrestling, or did you have any other plans for after your wrestling?
Yeah, John's coaching tree is pretty awesome. It's probably the most head coaches, right now. I think John just prepares you well, and you don't even know it at the time. John has a way, a system in a way that you really can't put to paper. It all starts with the attitude and the mentality. So I think that's why he has so many coaches that are successful. And we all, those of us who, I wouldn't say all of us had a passion for coaching. I think it just became natural of what we were good at. And I wasn't planning on being a coach. I was planning on, my dad owned his own business, so I was going back and I was going to work for my dad and hopefully take that over one day. And I just remember I was, packing the moving truck up, and coach called me and was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" It was right after my senior year, and I was like, "Well, I'm packing up. I had just gotten married right out of college, and we were going to move back to Kansas City, and I was going to start working for my dad." And he was like, "Well, do you want to stay and train, or do you want to stay and be a grad assistant and coach?" And I was really excited about the coaching part. I just had surgery, so competing, I felt like I was going to be behind, and quite candidly, I didn't end my senior year how I wanted, so I was a little bitter at the sport a little bit. And so coaching was a really exciting prospect, and it was something that really ignited a new fire in me.
Did you start out coaching at Oklahoma State?
Yes, I was a grad assistant there for 2 years. And then I went to Stillwater High School for 2 years. It was probably the best coaching spot that I've been at. I loved my time at other places, but we had a phenomenal team. We were top 10 in the country, and we won state that year. And I got to coach a lot of kids that are actually graduating this year or graduated last year, that wrestled for Oklahoma State and a couple other schools. So I learned a lot coaching high school.
What are some specifics that you did learn? Because obviously it's not a lot different in the sense of wrestling and coaching different athletes from college, but at the same time it is a totally different landscape with so many different rules and regulations and things you have to follow, along with the mindset and who the type of kids are and the type of wrestlers coaching from college to high school. So what are some specifics that you did learn from coaching high school?
Well, as a coach, as a high school coach, you have to wear a lot of different hats. As a college coach, you got an academic advisor, you got a strength coach, you got, sports psychologists, you got nutritionists, you got people that take care of a lot of areas. And as a high school coach, you have to do everything. You have to mop the mats. You have to, you're the academic advisor, you're the strength coach, you're the conditioning coach, you're everything. And then you have to teach as well. So you learn how to teach kids, and you learn how to communicate with them. You learn how to break things down for them. And that's really, really the most important things that I learned, was that you learn how to do a lot. You learn how to manage your time. You learn where to put your effort. And you learn that not everybody's at the high school level is there to win a state title. Some of them are just there to be on the team and try out wrestling. And your goal is to motivate them to be the best that they can be, regardless of whether what their goals are. And, at every level you have some guys to that extent. So that, and just, having that relationship, being with your guys all day, every day, you see how strong of a bond that you can get with your wrestlers. And then you learn that it's more about winning and losing, or it's less about winning and losing, and it's more about, making sure that they're prepared for life. And that's really when my coaching attitude and mindset changed. When I went there, it was about winning. And it was about, I had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that, 4 guys that end up being All-Americans at the next level. And for me, I saw that opportunity, and I was excited about winning. And then I got there and realized that there's more to life. It's really about changing guys' lives.
Absolutely. And I can totally understand that, how, I mean, it's really crazy how you can go from coaching at Oklahoma State, where you're the grad assistant, where everybody wants to be a national champ and All-American, and everybody's driven to be an amazing wrestler, and if you've got that set up for you already. And then you can go coach at high school, and some kids doing it because it's a new sport that they want to try. And it's crazy that they coach high-level college athletes to total beginners. And that's a big, big difference. So you moved from Stillwater High School to North Carolina?
Yes. So when Coleman Scott went out there, he was the assistant coach. The head coach at the time said, "Hey, bring who you want with you," and Coleman called me. So I left in the middle of the year, my second year coaching high school. I left in like October, November, and went out to the University of North Carolina and spent, I think 4.5 years there as assistant coach.
In that time, I'm not really sure the timing, but when did Coleman become the head coach? Were you there for that?
Yes. So after our first year there, he became head coach. I want to say it was in the summer of 2015.
And then 2016 was when Tony Ramos came? Or is that a little after?
So we were there a full year from 14 and 15, and then 15, and because Coleman was trying to make the Olympic team still, and so that summer he became head coach, and then when he became head coach, we hired another assistant, Bryce Hassman, and then Coleman wrestled at the Olympic trials, and lost to Tony in basically the semis. And then shortly after that, Tony left Iowa, and on our way back from the trials, Tony called and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a place to train." And so that's kind of really how that all transpired. Is Tony had some goals, and he thought Coleman and our staff could help him get there. And so right after he became head coach.
Okay, so that staff was pretty loaded at the time with you, Coleman, and then Tony.
So we went a full year without Tony. We went a full year without Tony, and then Tony came in.
Right. So. Okay. When did the job open at Little Rock? I knew that was really recent, about a year and a half, 2 years ago. How long had you been coaching at North Carolina before that opened?
So I got to North Carolina in 2000, in the kind of the end of 2014. The job opened in June of 2018, and I was hired in July of 2018. So a little over a year ago. And I coached from North Carolina for basically four seasons.
Okay. Okay, so when that job opened up, did you, as soon as it opened up, did you start looking towards that, or did someone have to reach out to you And did you have to really think about that, or was it kind of a, yeah, this job's meant for me, I'm going to take it?
Yeah, I had a unique, career and a unique path, and when this job opened, I immediately, Coleman and I started talking about it, and we quickly realized that this would be a great fit for me. And so
Mm-hmm.
we had some ties through some people we knew, and Mr. Hatcher, who helped start the program. So I immediately started reaching out, and I just kind of kept knocking on their door until they opened. And I did everything I could to get a phone interview, and then I did everything I could to get an in-person on-campus interview. And then from that point, I mean, God's hand was in all of it. He was opening all the doors for me. And so at that point, when the interviews were over, I remember coming back and I told my wife, I was like, I was exactly who I am every single day. And if that's not
Mm-hmm.
who they want, then I'm not a good fit. And this isn't going to be a good fit for us. And so I was super excited about it. I was fired up. I really wanted the job. And when they called, it was an instant yes. It was there was no hesitation. Like, I wanted the job. And I kind of knew that
Right.
from the day that I heard the announcement. I knew I was very interested. And when I found out who was involved and who was getting the program off and running, I was all in.
That's awesome. And so now I see Little Rock has started. They have a full wrestling facility. Really cool map, by the way, and pretty big recruits coming in. It's pretty set up now. But when you took it, it was nowhere near that situation. What were some of the first steps that you had to take to start moving towards a real set up program, ready to go, ready to start a growth program?
Well, first you got to get a team. You got to you got to
Right.
have a plan. I created a plan before I even got the job, and I stuck to the plan. And first part of it is get a team and build a culture that believes and buys into something bigger than themselves, and that they are going to put their arms around. I say our culture, just who we are and what we stand for, and protect that, and fight every single day. And so we did that.
Mm-hmm.
We got that, and then I wanted an assistant coach who embodied the same, and hired Coach Javier. And then it was really about, through that process, creating a brand and creating an identity. And that's kind of where the mat idea came from. Wrestling's relatively new in Arkansas, and so we wanted something that people could identify with. So we came up with the idea that when you see an octagon, you think of what? You think of a UFC fight. You think it's going to be a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that we had a good base of fans that were wrestling fans, but we also had a big base here that were Little Rock fans for the university that didn't know anything about wrestling,
Right.
had never seen it. So
Right.
we wanted them to identify with something, and that's where we kind of started building our mat and our idea for our duels. And our identity was who we are and what we stood for, and then to be different and not just be here to compete. And that's where a lot of the ideas came from.
That's really cool. So building a team, did you have to recruit the whole team, or were there wrestlers at Little Rock that wanted to be a part of the team? Like before the program was started, they were already students there.
No, I was by myself for a year before I hired Coach Javi, and my
Mm-hmm.
goal was to have 24 wrestlers when he got here, and I had 25. And so yeah, I think I did 75 away recruiting trips alone throughout the year, and I had probably, between officials and unofficials, somewhere around 60 or 70 official and unofficial visits to campus. So I spent just about every day for an entire year working to get things in place.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And you just got back from Ironman too, recruiting, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I don't miss Ironman. I love Ironman. It's a great tournament.
That one's pretty cool. I can't wait till I can go. That just looks like a great atmosphere, just so close, tight, but it's pretty suffocating.
Yeah.
Um, So you did a pretty heavy job recruiting. You got 25 guys by the time you got your other coach. And now you see like a culture in Little Rock for the wrestling program, and it's really starting to grow. What are some steps that you need to take from here to move forward to become a real um, powerhouse of a program? You're in the Pac-12.
Yes. So, that was part of it. We wanted to get into a conference that fit what we wanted and our needs. We got that. The next step is to really build some depth on the team and to get, 35 wrestlers and 35 guys who live, eat, sleep, drink, breathe wrestling and want to live for something bigger than themselves. And, that's the process. I think looking at next year's recruiting class, it's not necessarily, if you were looking for a girlfriend, it wouldn't be the hot girlfriend, but it would be the one that would always have your back, right? And so it would be, I look at this class as a very sneaky good class. And we're already starting our junior class off really strong. We got 2 top 100 commitments, and now it's about getting the best wrestlers that we can possibly get that fit us and fit who we are. And I think we're well on the way. So great things take time. I know that this isn't going to happen overnight, but we got a good core group of guys here. And if we can keep them together in our next class, keep them together, we're going to be pretty good in a few years.
I definitely expect that for sure. The group that seen of Rock going from nothing, zero program to this whole setup that you have now. You won your first duel, and then you have another one this Friday against, this is what I want to talk about a little bit too, North Carolina, right?
Well, we have App State tomorrow, and
App
then we
State
have and then North Carolina on Friday.
So I will be going to the North Carolina duel. I live in Memphis, so it's not too far. So I'm going to go to that. I'm really excited, but I want to talk a little bit about what's it going to be like for you to coach against a team that you coached for 4 years. Is it going to be any different?
Well, awesome. I'm super pumped to have you. I didn't know you were coming. That's really cool. Make sure you come up and say hi to me, and we can meet face to face.
For sure.
It's going to be awesome because Coleman's one of my, very best friends, and I've become great friends with Tony and some other guys on staff. And, it's going to be passionate. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be, hopefully a little heated because you don't like losing, but you especially don't like losing to your buddies. And so
right.
I expect the action-packed duel. It's going to be tough. They're a really good team. And we're going to have to be prepared for a fight, and we're going to have to win some matches we're not supposed to win the duel. But that's what wrestling is about. That's what, people who become great, that's what they do. They find ways to do things they're not supposed to. So Friday night's going to be one of those nights for us. Absolutely.
And I'm hoping, I'm not too familiar with your wrestlers right now, but I'm hoping to get to learn a little bit about them and their past, and hopefully, I think it's going to be a really great duel, and I'm really excited to be going to that.
Absolutely, we're pumped to have you.
All right. Well, I've one more topic that I want to cover, and that is Little Rock home? Do you see that as the rest of your coaching career, pretty much, or will you build this and maybe think about leaving to another program?
Well, I don't think it's wise to look into the future and say I want to be somewhere else. We have made this home.
Right.
We bought a house here. My dad is, my family's moved here. I love the area. I love Arkansas. Arkansas is a hidden gem. People think of it as, probably hillbillies and this and that, but it's really a hidden gem of a state, and it's beautiful. It's a great area. My kids, we found a fantastic school and friends and people that we now call family here. And for us, this is a long-term, this is long-term for us. And you never know where God takes you. You never know where God's will is. But right now it's here in Little Rock, and we're going to continue to live in that and try to do his will. And, for us, that's what's most important. And but short answer, this is home, and this is where we want to be.
Absolutely. That's awesome, and I'm excited for the future of Little Rock. Um, doesn't doesn't Pat Smith coach a youth club there?
Yeah, Pat Smith is about 5 miles away from us. Our his kids and my kids actually go to school together. His daughter and my
Really?
son are in the same class.
Does your son wrestle?
He does, kind of. He goes to practice. He went to one tournament last year. Probably go to one tournament this year. He's 7, so he just has fun with it.
That's good. Does he wrestle for Pat Smith?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty cool. Um, does do you ever have Pat Smith come up to your program up there and ever come up to coach or watch practices or duels or anything?
Yeah, Pat's up here all the time. He's always around. He's in a roundabout way directly involved in our program.
Hmm.
He's kind of the foundation. Him and a few other guys are the foundation of Arkansas wrestling. So for him to not be involved in this wouldn't make sense. So it's yeah, he's definitely around.
That is pretty cool to have. I mean, first 4-time national champ in a starting program. That's pretty helpful, I imagine. Then you can probably directly be tied to his club and be able to recruit from there. I bet it's pretty helpful as well. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. He's getting a crop of kids through that are pretty good, and we want to we want to be we want to be recruiting Arkansas kids for sure.
mhm. Absolutely. Um, well, you have to come over to Tennessee sometime for some recruiting, and I'll
Absolutely,
see you this weekend too.
absolutely. I'll see you this weekend, buddy.
All right, sounds good.
All right, bye.
Bye.